Hello my friends! Today we will finally take a look at Fujifilm's newest contender in growing mirrorless market, the X-T3. At the moment it is one of the most popular mirrorless cameras, and I will say right at the beginning that it has surprised me a couple of times. Unlike the other competitors, Fujifilm is sticking with APS-C sized sensor, but it is a brand new one, so in this video we will take a look at how it performs in various situations, how is the handling, build quality, autofocus, and since the Fujifilm is now also serious about the video, we will take a look at that as well. Comparison with Sony A7 Mark III and Panasonic G9 will be coming soon as well, so stay tuned. Before we get to the performance, I would like to talk a bit about the design of this camera, because Fuji has been making quite beautiful vintage looking cameras for a while, and X-T3 continues with this trend. I do like the simple shape with electronic viewfinder placed on the top. The materials are also very high quality, it is very solid and well built, so the X-T3 definitely looks and also feels like a premium product, no complaints in this regard. As I've said, Fujifilm has decided to stay with APS-C sized sensor, but it uses brand new X-Trans 4 backside illuminated 26.1 megapixel sensor. 26 megapixels is in my opinion more than sufficient for a vast majority of use cases, including fairly large prints. The sharpness of photos is great, no complaints there, and what is important is that the processing has no problem with managing this resolution, so it doesn't compromise the speed and video capabilities. In terms of the dynamic range, it is really good. At base ISO, which is 160, you can recover a lot of data from both shadows and highlights. Going to -100 and +100 is not a problem. At higher ISO, like 3200, the dynamic range is still very good, with no color shift, not even at 6400, and it still gets the colors right at ISO 12800, so that is a very good performance, and with this sensor you have a lot of flexibility in post. Regarding the ISO performance, this is the first major surprise. At ISO 3200 it is very clean and it is definitely usable for a majority of use cases. Even 6400 looks really good. The noise is visible, but the noise pattern is rather pleasant, and even 12800 could be usable in low dynamic range scenes, which is a great result, but there is a catch. With X-T3 at given aperture and shutter speed, you will get about 2/3 of a stop darker exposure in comparison with other manufacturers. So for example, you need to use ISO 5000 to match ISO 3200 on other cameras, but even with that in mind, I am still happy about the ISO performance. Regarding the X-Trans processing, I am not the biggest expert on this, but I haven't had any issues with that using Lightroom 8. I haven't seen any artifacts or bending or anything like that. The green looks natural in my opinion, so no problems here. Fujifilm is known for their color science, and that is definitely one of the strengths of this camera. RAWs are quite neutral, which is good in my opinion, the colors are really nice. Saturation is quite high, but not too much, and I didn't have to fix the RAWs in any major way. I'm generally not much of a JPEG shooter, but Fujifilm has very cool film simulation feature, which is a lot of fun to use. You can choose one of 10 film stocks, or if you shoot RAW, you can choose film simulation in playback menu, which is very useful. Of course, I like the Eterna the most. It preserves a lot of dynamic range, there is a bit of fade, and it indeed looks a bit like a film, so personally I shoot RAW plus Eterna with this camera, and overall I am very happy with the results. Regarding the handling, it is fairly small camera, although there are significantly smaller APS-C cameras on the market, but it uses the space really well. The grip is shallow, but it is better than it looks. You can hold it pretty comfortably with lighter lenses. For use with heavy lenses, I really recommend getting the grip, but I will get to that later. X-T3 is also weather sealed. On X-T3 you have 5 dials, and the handling is a bit different in comparison with other cameras. You can set shutter speed and ISO using the dial with set values, and aperture with the ring on the lens. If you want to use aperture priority for example, just set the aperture on the lens and leave both ISO and shutter speed on A. You can also choose shutter speed values, for example between 1/38 of the second and 1/68 of the second with the rear dial. Overall, I do like this style of controls. If you don't like it, you can set a front and rear dial to control exposure settings. There is also exposure compensation dial, and yes, it works with auto ISO. There is also dry mode dial, where you also have video mode, bracketing and panorama mode, and dial for controlling metering mode. On the front side there is also autofocus mode switch and custom button. Buttons on the rear side of the camera are also well positioned. There are both AE lock button and AF lock button for back button focusing, and there is one more function button on the top of the camera and button on the viewfinder for switching between the display and the viewfinder. Joystick is also here, which is very important, and you can use it to select the focus point or navigate menu. The handling of the X-T3 can be significantly improved with the addition of battery grip, which is also very well made. It extends the palm grip a lot, and it also holds 2 batteries while letting you keep the battery in camera, which is great. And it also has DC input for powering the camera and charging the batteries, so big thumbs up for this. There is also boost mode, which increases the speed of autofocus, viewfinder refresh rate and some other things, and doubled controls. I would say that the battery grip is almost a must-have if you want to use X-T3 as all-round professional camera, although you can get by without it of course. X-T3 has 2 UHS 2 card slots, so wedding shooters won't be stressed out. On the left side you also have HDMI port, USB-C port, mic jack and headphone jack. Fujifilm has improved the autofocus a lot over the time, and now it can really compete with the best cameras out there. X-T3 uses 425-point on-sensor phase detection autofocus system, and it stills, it is very fast and also accurate. Continuous tracking is also very impressive. It will be suitable for sports and wildlife. It has really good wide/tracking mode, and you can also customize the autofocus according to the situation. It also has face tracking mode, which is very responsive, and it can also focus on the eye. In video, it is also among the best systems that I've tried. It is pretty smooth, although in some specific situations it can be a bit jumpy if there are sudden changes. You can also adjust both speed and responsiveness, and these settings have significant impact on the overall performance. I definitely recommend trying these out to see what works the best in specific situation. Default settings are a pretty good choice for all-round use. The autofocus is definitely reliable and all-round usable for both stills and video, and it even handles difficult situations really well. Regarding the in-body image stabilization, well, there isn't one. If you want the in-body image stabilization, you have to go with XH1. There is not much that I can say about this, because I don't know whether it would make the body larger or compromise the camera in some way. I won't lie, I do miss it. It would complement the excellent 16-55mm f2.8 really well, but I can generally live without it. X-T3 uses 1,000,000.3-inch display with touch capabilities, and it is sufficiently sharp and bright, fairly usable outdoors unless there is very strong sunlight, so overall it is a good panel. It is tiltable vertically and also horizontally for low-angle vertical shooting. Some users would prefer a rotatable screen. Both styles have different advantages, so that is a matter of preference. The viewfinder uses 3.69mm dot panel with 0.75 times magnification. The resolution is great, it is super sharp, the brightness is also really good, the size is about average, but it is very good electronic viewfinder overall. The refresh rate in boost mode can go up to 120 Hz, so there is no lag either. Fujifilm X-T3 is also one of the most capable mirrorless video cameras on the market, despite that this wasn't a priority to Fujifilm in the past. It shoots 4K DCI or Ultra HD video using the whole sensor, so it is downsampled 6.2K video, so the sharpness is great. X-T3 can shoot 4K DCI up to 60 frames per second, which is still quite rare, and you can also shoot in 100, 200 or even 400 megabits per second, and you can choose between long GOP or all intra compression. Besides that, it can also shoot in 10-bit 420 using H.265 codec. You can also combine that with Fujifilm's F-Log, which provides flat footage highly suitable for color grading. In video, you can't go as high with ISO. The noise is quite visible already at 3200, which is as high as I would go. If you really have to, ISO 6400 can be somewhat usable, but that is still a really good result. I also like the f-log a lot. It captures a lot of dynamic range at base ISO, which is 6400. Color grading this footage is pretty easy. In combination with 10-bit recording, it captures a lot of information, even though it is compressed 420 10-bit, so I am very happy with the f-log on X-T3. You also have an option to shoot slow motion 1080p video up to 120 frames per second, and the quality of this video is pretty good for slow motion video, although there is 1.29 times crop. One disadvantage is that clips are split into 4 GB segments, so we will have to put those together in post. The rolling shutter also isn't a problem with X-T3, it is well under control, which is also very important. The user interface is not the biggest strength of the X-T3. Unfortunately, you can't use touchscreen to navigate the menu or change settings, so you are stuck with buttons and the joystick. The quick menu lets you change settings using arrows and thumb dial, and it is useful, although I have seen better implementations of quick menu. The main menu is pretty well organized, although there will be some learning curve because of the sheer amount of options. You can basically customize anything on this camera. Fortunately, great physical controls compensate a lot for the UI, so I will say that the X-T3 has very good usability. The battery is rated for 390 shots, it is physically small, and I can get through a day of usual street shooting with one battery, but if you record 4K, you will need a couple of batteries. Fortunately, the vertical grip triples the battery life and makes you able to shoot for a very long time or power the camera from wall socket. X-T3 is also very fast. It lets you shoot 11 frames per second with mechanical shutter, which is enough for most types of sport shooting and wildlife. If that is not sufficient for you, you can shoot 20 frames per second using electronic shutter, or even 30 frames per second with 1.25 times crop and 16 megapixel resolution. Buffer can take about 36 RAWs. I have tested the X-T3 with Fujinon 16 to 55mm f2.8 RLM-VR lens, and it is an excellent zoom lens, which helps the X-T3 fight against full-frame competition by providing similar results to using f4 zoom on full frame with very useful 24 to 82.5mm full-frame equivalent focal length. I will make a separate video about this lens. Fuji lens selection for X-mount is quite complete. There isn't really anything missing, except for more budget-friendly options. To be honest, I didn't really expect the X-T3 to be such a valid option in highly saturated mirrorless market. Three main highlights of this camera for me are the new sensor, which has great dynamic range and ISO performance, the autofocus, which is among the best on the market, and video features that make it one of the most capable video cameras on the market. Negatives are the lack of in-body image stabilization, very limited use of touchscreen and not the most user-friendly interface and menu, and also the absence of more budget-friendly lens choices. Overall, the X-T3 impresses by both performance and usability, and even though there is still room for an improvement, I have to say that I like it a lot. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.